Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm coming to you today with a ship breakdown for the Imperial class Star Destroyer from Star Wars Armada. This has been requested quite a bit. I'm finally getting around to it, and it's long overdue because this is the ship that got me to fall in love with Armada. A little story before I get into it completely. I was on the fence with Armada because I was heavily into X-Wing when they first announced it, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to get into a whole other game, especially, that it had like this weird maneuver tool and I was going to have to learn a whole new set of rules, and I just wasn't sold on it. And it wasn't until they previewed the Imperial class Star Destroyer that I said, okay, all right, I'm in. And they actually previewed it before the base game even came out. So Wave 2 was already spoiled before the core game even hit. So that was so that was a long time ago, and it's been great, and I'm glad it got me into it because I love Armada and I love the Imperial class Star Destroyer. So the Imperial class Star Destroyer comes in two variants: the ISD-1 and the ISD-2. And the ISD-1 is at 110 points, while the ISD-2 is at 120. And the main differences between these two ships are their anti-squadron, whereas the ISD-1 has a black and a blue, and the ISD-2 has two blues. The actual dice are a little different as well. The ISD-1 has 3 black in the front, taking one of the reds away and 2 of the blues away. And it has 2 black on the sides, whereas the ISD-2 has 2 blue on the sides and 4 red, 4 black in the front. And one of the biggest differences, and this is actually a unique, a unique difference here, is that while the ISD-2 has the highly sought after defensive retrofit, the ISD-1 does not have the defensive retrofit. Instead, it has a second offensive retrofit. So it's the only ship in the game, as of right now, that has 2 offensive retrofits, which makes it unique in that it opens up a world of possibilities and combinations that weren't there before. So first I'm going to talk about the ISD-1 a little bit. Now, this ship does not, well, it does have black dice. It's kind of rare in the fact that it does not have an ordnance upgrade. So you don't really get any of those black crits. So that's interesting. Now it does have a lot of flexibility with the boarding parties, and generally I'm not really going to talk about Wave 6 and beyond right now because it was just spoiled, but just for the sake of, because the cat's already out of the bag, because you have that second offensive retrofit, you are going to have, when those do come out, you're going to have some flexibility. So this could be a great candidate for boarding parties if boarding parties are going to be enhanced by having an extra offensive retrofit. Now we don't know every other card that's going to come out and how they'll all synergize, but you'll have some, if you really wanted to be able to extend your squadron limit and also have boarding parties on, you'll be able to do that with an ISD-1. So one way you might see an ISD-1 configured is taking advantage of both offensive retrofits. So you might see expanded hangar bay and boosted comms. So now you can have 5 squadrons instead of just 4, because 4 is already very high. But now here's a ship that can go up to 5 and also activate them all at long range. Or maybe if you don't want to activate them all at long range, maybe you'll put rapid launch bay on, and now you're carrying 5 squadrons on with you and being able to drop them all at range 1. And maybe you can put a flight commander on there, so now you can move and then drop 5 TIE fighters in somebody's face, which will just be insane. Especially after Sloane comes out. Oh, wait, but Sloane is in Wave 6, so I'm not going to talk about that too much right now. Once she comes out, once Wave 6 is in our hands, then I'm going to talk about that a lot more and all the things that it can go into. But can you tell I'm still excited about the future? But if you don't want Flight Commander, Chirano is another option for this ship. If you're running a lot of squadrons, now he or his ability can affect a lot of different people. That will work better if you're using boosted comms, or if you're using a couple of lambdas, he would work well there. And the ISD-1 is also a ship that I could definitely see maybe using high capacity ion turbines on. These ion turbines, because they're a modification, it's usually, you usually don't want to use your modification on something that has a blue die, but because the side arcs don't have any blue dice, for the ISD-1. It's 2 black and 2 red. Now that adds something, that can get you the accuracy out of the side. So this is actually a really good spot for high capacity ion turbines. And I might even not even put anything in the, in the turbo laser slot, because at a certain point, it's going to get too expensive. But, you're not really, you really want to focus on your mid-range attacks here and closer. You want to get in close. So, granted, everything is good for the turbo laser slot, but if you're using up your modification, well then, high capacity ion turbines is pretty good for this ship. And so I also want to talk about the ISD-2 and some ways you might see that configured. It's very common to see what I call the holy trinity of upgrades, and that's gunnery team, ECM, and XI-7 turbo lasers. Now, you can swap XI-7 with something like spinal armament or something else there, but XI-7 is kind of the most well-rounded and almost universally works very, very well under just about every situation. There are a couple of situations you might want to swap it for something else, but that's kind of like the holy trinity there is you have your gunnery team, so you can, if this is your big ship, if this is your one huge awesome ship that needs to get its shots off, gunnery team allows it to shoot twice, ECM keeps it alive, and XI-7 and makes sure that the hits that it does have are more likely to actually cause damage. So, those are just the big three that you'll typically see on an ISD-2. And like I said, you might swap XI-7 for spinal armaments, or you might swap it for H9s. There's plenty of different configurations and things you might do, and we're going to talk about some more options as we go forward a little bit. Now I want to talk about the titles that come with the ISD. There's 3 titles. The first one is the Relentless. Now the Relentless only costs 3, so it's the cheapest title, but it's also the one that I use the least, but I don't necessarily see everybody else use the least. The Relentless basically reduces the number of command dials you have to assign to your ship by 1. Now, instead of just saying it takes it from 3 to 2, it reduces it by 1 because potentially there might be other things that also reduce. Maybe there's a commander that reduces the number of command dials, or maybe there's a crew efficiency expert someday or something like that. So it just reduces the total by 1. This will be fantastic if they ever come out with something else that allows you to reduce your command dials by 1 as well, and then you'll be able to have a single die Star Destroyer. Wouldn't that be interesting? But as it stands right now, just out of the box, the Relentless allows you to put 2 dials down instead of having to put 3. Now this allows you greater control over what your Star Destroyer is going to do, but it's important to note that your command value still stays the same. So while a Imperial Star Destroyer is command value of 3, the Relentless title does not reduce your command value. And the reason I make that distinction is certain things reflect your command value, like how many tokens you can hold before you have to discard one to take another one. So it's important to know that your command value is unaffected by this title. I think the Relentless is best suited for a newer player or somebody trying out a Star Destroyer or a high command 3 or higher ship for the first time. I think it allows a little bit, it's more forgiving. And just generally is better suited for a newer player. But even if you're not a newer player, it can be a good option for anyone who may have some difficulty in figuring out what commands they're going to want to use. Personally, I've been very, very lucky. Well, part of it's luck and part of it's planning, in that I usually pick the right command, or at least a command that works for just about any given time. And then also at the other time, a lot of times I have very singular function fleets, and that I'll know that, okay, I'm doing squadron commands all the time. And so I just have to set everybody to squadron commands 100% of the time, so I don't have to worry about command dials. Or maybe I'll go all concentrate fire, after the second turn, boom, 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 boom. And a lot of times I start nav, engineering, and then concentrate fire just from there on out if I'm doing a very offensive fleet. And so because my play style is like that, and I don't really change what I'm going to do once the game gets going, Relentless doesn't work for me very well. But it can be very, very good if you are in a multi-role configuration too. Perhaps you only have an ISD-1, and that's your largest ship, and everything else is small. And the ISD-1 has your commander on it, so it's your flagship, and it's also your carrier that's designed, that needs to be able to activate squadrons because it can hit 4 or even 5, depending on how you have it configured. Well, now that's going to be better for you because you're going to have, you're going to be able to, if you need to do engineering, because if they start attacking your flagship, you need to do engineering or nav to get out of there. Or if they're leaving your flagship alone, you need, then you can feel free to keep doing squadron commands. And if you're just not sure what's going to be required of you, and you're putting that ship as a multifunction or a hybrid ship, then Relentless can be very good for that. But personally, it's one that I generally don't use because I tend to run the same command over and over and over again. So if you ever play me now, you know to expect 90% of the time I'm just going to do the same command the whole game. So I guess I'm kind of showing my hand there a little bit. Next title is the Avenger. Now, the Avenger is a fantastic title. It's the single title I see most used. It's a very easy title to work. It works in almost every scenario. It can work in just about every game, and it has some things that it combos really, really well with. So with the Avenger title, it costs 5. It says that the defender cannot spend exhausted tokens when you're attacking. And there's an important distinction here too. This just says when attacking. So this also applies to squadrons. It doesn't have to be just ships. And so, as a matter of fact, I've had it done to me with somebody who had Agent Callus on an Avenger and was attacking a unique squadron of mine who had Scatter, so I figured, oh, I'll be fine. But he had Agent Callus, so he added a red die and the 2 blue from an ISD2. And I had already scattered once, and I couldn't scatter again. And so it's much more deadly than it seems at first. When you don't even, I didn't even think about, for the first year I was playing these things, I didn't even think about, really using Avenger towards squadrons. But it's pretty powerful, even against squadrons. All right, so the defender can't spend exhausted tokens. Now, this has a fantastic and initial reactions was that it was going to combo really, really well with Overload Pulse, which it does. So if you have, let's say, a Raider or some, if you have some other ships that have Overload Pulse that go activate before the Avenger, you can hit a ship, you get that blue crit, Overload Pulse triggers, knocks out all their defense tokens, and now when the Avenger attacks them, they have nothing. And I said I wasn't going to talk about Wave 6 that much, but it's also really just, I've got to say that Boarding Troopers is going to combo extremely well with the Avenger title. And it's just going to be insane. But I don't want to talk too much about that because we have got a long ways until Wave 6 is out, and then even longer after because we need to play test it. And then, somebody who's watching this way back then is like, why is he talking about Wave 6? Wave 10 is on the boat right now. So hopefully you're still watching my videos that far into the future. If so, I do apologize for the time delay between then and now, but right now it's all we've got is Wave 5 and below. So yeah, it combos really well with that. Avenger also really works well with larger fleets. So if you've got 4 or more ships in your fleet, and Avenger's like maybe your only really expensive ship, you have all your smaller ships. You don't even have to have Overloaded Pulse, but if you do, that's a bonus. But all your small ships attack first. Things get spent, it also plays mind games with your opponent because now they have to think, do I want to spend my only brace when I know Avenger hasn't attacked yet? And then you can totally mind screw them even more by, they say, all right, I'm letting all that damage through from maybe your victory attacks and has like 4 or 5 damage coming through. They don't spend their brace. And then you say, okay, it's my Avenger's turn, I'll attack somebody else. And now it made you not spend your brace on purpose, I don't know, there's just all kinds of mind games you can play with that too. But it does work very well with larger fleets. It doesn't work well if you've got like only 3 ships and you find yourself in a position where Avenger has to activate first. So that's one of the weaknesses of it. But I mean, it's only 5 points. It's a pretty small cost for such a fantastic title. Next up, the Devastator. Now, the Devastator was the first title I ever used for the ISD. It's also the one I don't ever see anybody use anymore. I don't. And I think a lot of it's because it costs 10 points. So basically, once per round, if you're attacking from your front hull zone, you can add a blue die to your attack pool for each of your discarded defense tokens. Now, I'm going to revisit the Devastator because I think as time has gone by, and this is why I make these videos farther in the future, because now we've had time to see other things and other things that have come out. I think the Devastator is worth taking another look at here. Because what I like about it is it doesn't restrict range. So you can do this at long range. You can roll blue dice at long range this way. You could potentially roll 4 extra blue dice, but it is only once per turn. So gunnery teams isn't going to really be a big deal with on a Devastator. And it's still good, but it's not going to be like, you can consider other things. But it works at long range. So if you had spent all of your tokens, you could potentially roll 8 dice at long range, or more depending on your other upgrades if you did concentrate fire. But just naturally, you could have 8 dice that way. Or if you're at medium range with an ISD2, you could roll 12 dice. So this ship actually allows for the biggest potential attack in the game, or the biggest singular attack in the game, and that's pretty impressive. I also want to bring up the distinction here that this can combo really well if you're playing the Corellian Conflict. And here's how that works. If you have a scarred ship in the Corellian Conflict, so if you're flying Imperials, you get a Star Destroyer that's scarred, and you start the next round without repairing it, so it comes into the battle scarred. One of the things about being scarred is if you die, you're gone permanently, but you also have to discard one of your defense tokens when you start out. Now, it makes it very risky to put Devastator on a scarred ship. I actually considered doing this during the campaign I'm playing in right now, and I ended up not doing it. But I thought about it, and that's why I'm going to share this with you, because this would allow for even your very first attack to have an extra blue die. So you could roll blue dice at long range from from the very first round. And so that makes this very, very nasty. So that's like the first time I used to try to use Devastator, I would purposely try to exhaust tokens, and I would purposely do it. I mean, and it combos really well with Vader, because Vader gives you extra opportunities to spend defense tokens. And so I was running Vader and Devastator. I was re-rolling every single attack, and I think by turn 4, I had spent everything. And I was able to hit that, all right, here's 4 extra dice. But then I had no more defense tokens, and I was just easily taken out right after that, and much earlier than I should have. It might have even been turn 3. So if you're running Devastator, the idea here is don't purposely try to lose all your tokens right away, but think of it more as a consolation prize. If you're going down, if you're getting hurt, it makes you more powerful. So you're almost like a beast that's cornered. You're like, don't corner me, don't threaten me, because then I'll be even, you may strike me down, but I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. This is like the Obi-Wan Kenobi title right here. It's nasty, but you have to play it that way. You don't want to purposely get rid of all your stuff right away. But it combos well with Corellian Conflict because you're forced to get rid of one right away if your ship is scarred, and so if you do that. Now the risk is if you come in scarred, if you end up getting destroyed, now you permanently lose the Devastator title. But somebody out there try it, let me know how it works. I think it would be a fun thing to do in a campaign. It's also worth noting that there's a pretty cool option here with Nita, because a lot of times, so Nita came out and you could put TRC on a Star Destroyer. So Nita lets you swap a token. I want to point out that Nita lets you exchange a token. He's not actually discarding the one that he exchanges. So if you decide to get rid of one of the redirects and put an evade on there, that's not a discarded redirect. You can't ever, you couldn't recover it with tag, for example. So that's not a combo, but it is a combo because if you put the TRC on there with the evade, now you have yet another way to spend a defense token, and you could even potentially do a fantastic combo here. If you have already used your TRC, or if you've already used your evade once, and now you're attacking, you do a side attack, you TRC, one big shot there, and now a frontal attack, and you TRC, you spend your TRC to turn a red die into a double, and now that it's gone, you can trigger the Devastator title and add a blue die. Assuming that this was your first discarded token. So you could potentially get a lot more out of that TRC, and you would lose the evade, but if you needed to. And the things you can make that decision. You roll your dice and I need to kill this ship, otherwise it's all over. Or maybe you need an extra accuracy because it's Bright Hope and they're going to scatter, and you need that extra blue die, and you've got nothing else to let you re-roll. I'm like, well, I guess I can burn my TRC and then get an extra blue die, and then maybe it's there. So it's a nice little option that turns a TRC into, from being just a double hit to a double hit plus an extra blue die. So that's an option. Again, that's assuming that you haven't already used the Devastator ability, because it is only once per turn. So once you use it, you can't use it again. But if you haven't used it yet, you can consider doing it after you TRC. So that's cool. But I like Nita there. I like Nita a lot with it, and that's something I plan to fly very soon. So let's talk about the roles that the Imperial Star Destroyer can fill in Star Wars Armada. Now, primarily, it's going to be the centerpiece of your fleet as an attacker. So usually fleets that run an ISD only have one. It is possible to have more than one. I've actually run 3 before. I don't recommend that because it's I can't tell you exactly why it doesn't work. For me, it just didn't work. And I think because I had spent so many points on ships, I didn't have enough upgrades to make those ships shine. And I think that's one of the things you need. You need an ISD naked is almost a waste of points. Either you've got to have a couple of upgrades on there. Like I talked about the Holy Trinity on an ISD2. You know, if you don't have ECM on your ISD2, for example, you can just, a single accuracy can, you know, wreck you over and over and over again. So I think you really, you know, if you're going to spend 120 points on a ship, you know, spend an extra 30 points and make it a fantastic ship. So now you can run 2, you know, if you want to have 2 primary, you know, centerpiece attackers, but then you're going to really leave yourself bare for the rest of your fleet. So that's why typically it works as the centerpiece as a single attacker, and that's one role. It also works as a carrier, although it works as a carrier best with the ISD-1 because of the double offensive retrofit. So it works very well for that. It also works as a tank, a great place to put your flagship, but that works best if it's the ISD-2 because of the defensive retrofit. It makes it a very, very good place to put your commander to keep he or she safe and loving life. So those are some of the roles that the ISD can perform. Next, I'm going to talk about the commanders. I'm only going to talk about the commanders that we have in hand right now, so nothing about Wave 6, even though that's going to be so amazing. I'm talking about the commanders that we have right now, and I ranked them based on how well I think they affect the ISD. It doesn't mean that if it's at the bottom of my list, it's a bad commander. It just means that the strengths of this particular commander may not be as good for the Imperial class Star Destroyer. So I'm going to start from bottom and work my way up. At number 8, the bottom one is Screed. And I don't dislike Screed. He's just kind of gotten overshadowed lately. And the reason I have him so low is there really isn't, you know, there's no ordnance on the ISD-1 or ISD-2. And there's just a lack right now of ISDs running crit-specific upgrades. So there's nothing that the ISD does that really needs that crit so bad that you need, you know, to have Screed for it. So while Screed can certainly work in a fleet, maybe an Avenger fleet where you have other ships with overload pulse, you know, Screed can work great for that. But this list is specifically for the ISD itself. And so Screed doesn't really do much for the ISD itself. Although he can be great in a fleet that has an ISD, but what he does doesn't help the ISD too much. If you have Avenger and you got overloaded pulses, though, he still has a use. Next up is Tag. Now, Tag is lower on this list because he counters some of the play that we'd see in this list. Like, for example, if you had the Devastator, you might not want to get that extra, you know, that extra redirects token back because you're hoping to get the, you know, the damage, the extra damage from Devastator. So it almost kind of counters. It's not synergizing with what the ISD is doing. Although it's still not bad because the ISD only has a single brace. So if you do lose your brace, he can get you your brace back. And so he's not terrible, but because he has some counter synergy with one of the titles, that's why I put him a little bit lower. He's certainly not terrible. I just think there's other people who have a little bit better synergy than Tag does. Next up is Ozzel. Now, Ozzel is a little bit lower on this list, but the fact that the ISD can go very, very fast, up to speed 3, and the fact that I think it would be very wise for you to very often be doing nav tokens, especially if you are running more than one, or if you need to flank. The ISD isn't really much of a flanker, but Ozzel can potentially, you know, give you that extra maneuverability and you know, and give you the surprise factor. So Ozzel's coming in at number, 6? I think that's number 6. I didn't write the numbers down. I'm just kind of working my way up the list. Next up is Tarkin. Tarkin is universally good for any ship that has a lot of command. So he is, you know, naturally going to work for any kind of Star Destroyer. The reason he's not higher on my list, though, is because he's so expensive. And the Imperial Star Destroyers are very expensive. So you combine the most expensive commander with the most expensive ship, and it really cuts out room. And I talked about before how this ship really needs upgrades to really shine, and Tarkin kind of can take away from some of those upgrades. Granted, he still can work. I mean, it's great getting those, maybe, all right, so now I don't have anything to mitigate a bad dice roll. Well, I could always give out concentrated fire tokens each turn. And that's a little something, but it's not super great. So Tarkin is generally good. He works in a kind of a hybrid force if you've got squadrons and you've got, different, and you're going to need the engineering because you're expecting to take a lot of damage. And, if you're a very versatile force, he's still good. He's still good. All right, next, Constantine. So Constantine is right smack in the middle of this list, and he works because he's, this is a large ship. It covers a lot of area. You need two, but they can be medium ships as well. So, because he's a large or medium ship, Constantine does work with him, but he's also got some synergy with Phylon tractor beams, right? So I'll take the ISD-1, for example, with the 2 offensive retrofits. Well, I said before we had a lot of flexibility there, so maybe I want to run tractor beams into my list, and Constantine will really synergize with that. And the other thing is because specifically with the ISD-1, not so much with the ISD-2, but specifically with the ISD-1 and the black dice, slowing somebody down with a ship that can go speed 3 can really help you get and stay into black dice range. And that's what a ship like the ISD-1 needs. Like, if you get in close range of the front arc of an ISD-1 and you're on the receiving end of that shot, you're probably dead. So, and Constantine can let that happen. So that's huge. That's fantastic, as a matter of fact. That's just really good stuff. Next up is Jerjerrod. Jerjerrod is my favorite new commander, and he works on so many ships, but the ISD-1 is one of the ISD itself is one of the ships he really, really shines with, especially if you're going at speed 3. He can turn a nav command into letting you do 2 clicks at speed 3, 1 click at speed 2, and 2 clicks at speed 1. Or 2-2-1. He effectively can let you turn sharper than 90 degrees. Sharper than 90 degrees. That's insane. Even just a 90, and at speed 2 he can let you do a 90-degree turn. But at speed 3, where you have no clicks at your first speed, he gives you 2 there, and then you've got 1 and 1, and so your nav command itself can now, it's just nuts. He can really let a nav command turn into something beautiful, and you don't even need to do the nav command too. That's the real beauty of it. You'll still become very, very maneuverable without having to do that. So if you're in shooting range and you just need to concentrate fire all the time, or you're taking fire and need to engineer all the time, or you're doing squadrons and you just need to keep doing squadrons all the time, Jerjerrod gives you that flexibility. And because you have so many shields, you can easily afford to take the damage too. So this ship works really, really well with Jerjerrod. Next up, Mahdi. Mahdi is always going to be on these lists very high, especially on a large ship where he gives this thing 14 hull. It raises it up from 11 to 14. It's hard enough to kill as it is, but 14 hull, man, it's so rare that when you're going up against a ship that you can, when they have Mahdi on an ISD-2 with, ECM, it's just so rare that you almost just want to say, you know what, I'm not attacking that ship. I'm just not. I'm going to go for everything else and hope I win on points. And that's kind of how it is. That's why Mahdi is so good for this. And then my number 1 is Vader. Now, it may seem odd that I have Vader at number 1 and Screed was at the bottom, but Vader works so much better, and he works on multiple times, and he has a lot of natural synergies. So let's talk about the Devastator, right? Vader's another way for you to spend tokens, and he also makes up for the lack of dice, being able to reroll dice. There are options, like you can, there are a few upgrades you can take that can let you reroll dice, but you don't have to with Vader. And you've got so many dice, and especially dice of different types. And almost every other upgrade that you would take for dice has a different drawback anyway. But with Vader, sometimes you'll want to spend those, like if you're running the Devastator. It's got natural synergy, and it also works against squadrons if you really needed to use him against squadrons. And because the ship has, both versions of it have more than one anti-squadron die, you might easily find yourself needing that 1 extra damage to finish off that one squadron who has your who has your Mauler Mythal tied up, and it's just, every time I've run ISDs and not had Vader, I've regretted it. and that's why Vader is my number one. So this has been the ISD breakdown. Let me know what you think, guys, and if you are not already a subscriber, I'd like to invite you to subscribe. I've got a lot more videos coming, a lot of news of the newest expansions that are coming out for not just Armada, but X-Wing, Imperial Assault. As soon as they announce stuff for that, I'm going to be all over that as well. Destiny has new stuff coming out soon. I also just launched Crabbok.com. It's still kind of in its infancy, but if you want to check it out over there, I got some forums and kind of just playing around with it, you know. If you wouldn't mind checking it out, let me know what you think. You know, you can even create an account and post some baloney on there if you want. But yeah, check out some of my other videos as well. I've broken down some other Armada ships and, you know, got some theories out there too. So let me know what you think, guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.